What if I told you that right now you're about to hear something no one was ever supposed to know? That somewhere, locked away in the shadows of time, a single piece of paper has carried a secret powerful enough to change the way you see love, loss, and the choices we never get back? Imagine holding in your hands a letter so intimate, so dangerous, that the person who wrote it never intended for it to be read by anyone, least of all by you. This is not just a story. This is a revelation, a confession written in ink that has faded but still bleeds with truth. A truth that was hidden, buried, and silenced for decades, until today. For years, people have asked why some secrets are kept and why some words are left unsaid. They imagine that silence is protection, that the past should be left alone. But what if silence destroys more than it saves? What if one letter, one moment, one decision had the power to change an entire life, and it was stolen by time itself? This is not a piece of fiction pulled from some dusty romance novel. This is real, and what you are about to hear was never meant to survive the years. Close your eyes for a moment and picture it. A wooden table, its surface worn from decades of quiet conversations and family meals. The smell of aged paper and cedar fills the air. A single envelope, edges curled and yellowed, rests under a sliver of late afternoon light. On the front, a name written in the kind of handwriting you don't see anymore. Deliberate, elegant, almost trembling. Inside is the voice of someone long gone, reaching across the years to speak now to you. Why? Because fate, or perhaps something greater, decided it was finally time. This is a story about love denied, about moments stolen by hesitation, and about the cruel way life moves on when we are not ready. It's about a man named James Carter, whose heart carried a truth too heavy to be spoken aloud. Instead, he poured it into words, sealed them inside an envelope, and left them for a future that was never supposed to come. He never imagined that future would arrive in your hands, on this day, in this moment. I need you to understand. This letter was hidden. Not lost, not misplaced, but hidden. Deliberately kept from the one person who needed to see it most. Think about that for a second. What would you do if you discovered that someone you loved had written you something so raw, so vulnerable, and someone else decided you should never see it? Would you feel betrayed, heartbroken, angry? Or would you simply break down, wondering what might have been different if those words had reached you in time? And now here you are, on the brink of knowing what was never meant for your eyes. Every sentence in this letter carries a heartbeat. Every word is heavy with meaning. And the further we go, the more you will realize this is not just James's story, it is yours too. Because whether we admit it or not, all of us have something we've left unsaid. All of us have moments we wish we could go back and rewrite. This letter is a mirror, and once you look into it, you may never see your own life the same way again. So stay with me, listen carefully, because in just a moment, I'm going to open this letter. And when I do, you will hear what James could never say out loud. You will step into a world of love that was forbidden, words that were stolen, and a truth that will not let you go once you've heard it. And when we turn that first page, everything changes. Before we unfold this truth together, I want to pause for something deeply important. If what you've heard so far has stirred something inside you, if it's made you think of your own unspoken words, your own hidden chapters, I want to ask you to share a prayer in the comments. It doesn't have to be long, it doesn't have to be perfect. Just write what's on your heart. Because here, we believe that words have power, not only to tell a story, but to heal, to lift, and to change lives. Every prayer you leave is a seed, and when we gather them together, something remarkable happens. People from all over the world read them, whisper them, carry them in their hearts, and lift them to God. You might never meet the person who needs your words the most, but your prayer could be the one that reaches them when they need it the most. That's the beauty of this space. We are not just telling stories, we are building a family of faith, hope, and love. So, before we go any further, take a moment and write your prayer below. Let's create a wall of faith that no fear or regret can tear down. And while you're here, if this story has touched you, please give it a like so it can reach more hearts. Hit subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter, because what's coming will shake you even more than what you've just heard. Now, let's open the letter. If you're hearing this right now, you've just opened something you were never meant to see. You've crossed into a place few ever dare to go. A place where truth has been locked away, not for years, but for decades. You're standing at the edge of a revelation, and the weight of it presses against your chest. Picture this. A dimly lit wooden table, scarred with the marks of time. The air is still, carrying the faint smell of aged paper and dust, the kind of scent that instantly whispers, "This is old, and it matters." In the center, an envelope rests like a relic from another life. Its paper is yellowed, its edges curled, and its seal, once firm, cracks under the quiet weight of the years. Across the front, in a fading, deliberate hand, a name is written. The strokes are slow, careful, almost trembling. And as your eyes follow each letter, something shifts inside you. You don't just see ink, you feel the pulse of the person who put it there. You haven't even opened it, and already you know this isn't just paper and ink. This is a heartbeat trapped in time. The air seems heavier, and your fingers hesitate, because you know that some truths once revealed can never be unseen, and yet you can't let it go. You can't walk away, because deep down, you know this moment, this letter, was meant for you to find. What could it be? A confession of love never spoken, a final goodbye that never reached its destination, an apology decades too late. Every possibility runs through your mind like a film reel, and with each one, your curiosity digs deeper, sharper. Was it written in a rush of passion, or in the slow, deliberate ache of regret? Was it sealed with a trembling hand, knowing it carried the weight of a lifetime? Close your eyes and picture the writer. See their face lit by the soft glow of a single lamp. See their shadow bending over the desk. Hear the scratch of the pen as each word bleeds onto the page. Imagine their breath, uneven, heavy, between sentences, as if the act of writing each line took a piece of their soul. Did they pause before sealing it, whispering a prayer for the one who would read it? Or did they leave it behind in silence, hoping it would never be found? And now, here you are, holding not just their story, but their silence. You've stepped into a moment, frozen in time, one that belongs to both of you now, because as much as this letter will reveal their truth, it will awaken something in yours. Maybe it's a memory you've tried to forget. Maybe it's a name you haven't spoken in years. Or maybe it's your own words, the ones you never sent, the ones still trapped inside your chest. That's the dangerous thing about a letter like this. It's not just read, it's felt. It reaches into you, pulls out your own hidden stories, and lays them bare. And whether you want it to or not, it changes you. I want you to stay here with me. Don't look away. Don't let the weight of this moment push you back. We are going to open this together. We're going to step inside the life of someone who never thought their words would be heard. And as we do, I need you to be part of this, not just as a listener, but as a witness. If you have ever kept something locked inside, something you wished you could say but never could, I want you to type these 2 words in the comments right now. I understand. Do it for the writer of this letter. Do it for yourself. Do it for the stranger who will scroll through the comments later, see your words, and feel less alone. You'll never know the life you might touch with that small act, but I promise you, it matters. This isn't just about a letter. It's about connection. It's about bringing what's been hidden into the light. And in just a moment, we'll break that seal and read aloud what's been waiting for years, untouched, unheard, unseen. Stay with me, because once we begin, there is no going back. His name was James Carter, a name that at first glance might seem like any other, ordinary, unremarkable, like 100 other names you've heard before. But in small-town America, names carry weight. They carry whispers, they carry stories that don't make it into history books, but live on in the quiet spaces between people's words. And this one has been buried so deep in the soil of time that you can almost feel the dust of decades settling on it. James Carter. The kind of name that belongs to a man who worked hard, kept his head down, and carried his secrets like they were stitched into the lining of his coat. It was 1974 when he wrote this letter. America was changing. Music drifting from radios, the hum of old trucks on country roads, the world outside moving fast. But life here in the heart of Kentucky still holding on to its slower rhythm. James lived in a modest farmhouse just outside Lexington. White paint peeling on the siding, a screen door that groaned each time it opened, and a porch where summer evenings stretched out under the soft buzz of cicadas. That's where the letter was born, not in a grand study or some city apartment, but in a place where the walls remembered every conversation, every laugh, every silence. It was raining that night. Not the violent kind of storm, but the steady, relentless kind that soaks the earth and seeps into your bones. The smell of rain-soaked wood drifted through the open window, mixing with the faint aroma of black coffee cooling in a chipped mug. Inside, the only sounds were the steady ticking of a grandfather clock in the corner and the deliberate, uneven scratch of a pen against paper. James sat at a small wooden desk in the corner of his bedroom. The desk wasn't much, just a piece he'd built himself years ago. But tonight, it felt like a confessional. The light from a single lamp spilled across the paper, casting his shadow long against the wall. His hands were not as steady as they once were. Each time the pen paused, his breath caught, as if he were measuring whether the next line was worth putting into the world. Every stroke of ink felt like lifting a stone from his chest and setting it down on that page. This was not a casual note. This was an unsent letter, the kind you write when you have no other way to speak. The kind you keep hidden, not because you want to, but because you have to. Every word was soaked in love and regret, every sentence a piece of a hidden truth that had lived in the shadows for far too long. These were his last words to someone who would never read them, or so he thought. The letter was addressed to a woman named Elizabeth Monroe. Her name was written with such care, you could almost imagine him practicing it in the air before letting the ink touch the page. She wasn't his wife. She wasn't a blood relative. She was something else entirely. Someone who had lodged herself so deeply in his heart that decades later, the mention of her name would still make his pulse stumble. Elizabeth had been the center of a love that had no place in the open, a connection too fragile and too dangerous to exist in the light of day. In that farmhouse, with rain pressing against the windows and the clock marking each second like a slow heartbeat, James began to write the truth he had carried for far too long. His words weren't polished or poetic. They were raw, jagged at the edges, but real. They told of Sunday mornings where his eyes searched for hers in the church choir, of passing her in town and exchanging a glance that held more than entire conversations could, of holding back the words that burned on his tongue because the right moment never came, and then life, as it does, simply moved on without asking permission. As the ink flowed, the letter became more than a message. It became an exhale. He wrote like a man who knew this might be the only time he would ever allow himself to speak these truths. A man who understood that some feelings live longer than people do. And yet, even as his hand shook and the rain deepened outside, there was something steady in the way he wrote her name again at the end. Like a prayer, like a goodbye, like both. This was more than a letter. This was a piece of a man's soul, sealed inside an envelope that he would never send, hidden away in a place where he believed no one would ever find it. But as we both know now, it didn't stay hidden. It found its way here, to me, to you, to this moment. And in just a heartbeat, we're going to step inside it together. The first lines of the letter tremble on the page, not because of the age of the paper, but because of the weight they carry. James begins carefully, almost apologetically. as though even now, decades after he wrote these words, he still feels the need to ask for permission to speak them. Elizabeth, it begins, her name standing alone at the top like a whispered prayer. You can see the way his handwriting shifts, the way the ink darkens, as if he pressed the pen harder for her name than for any other word. He doesn't begin with pleasantries. There's no talk of the weather, no small talk to ease into what he has to say. He steps straight into the truth, the kind of truth that has been festering in silence for years. He tells her that every Sunday morning, without fail, he would take the same seat in the same wooden pew, waiting for the moment the choir would stand. Not to hear the hymns, not at first, but to see her, to catch her eyes for a brief second before she looked away, to watch her lips form words he couldn't hear over the pounding of his own heart. He writes about the hymn book, how one summer Sunday she had set it down after service, the cover warm from her hands. He picked it up pretending he needed it, but truthfully, just wanting to touch the same pages her fingers had touched. He kept that book longer than he should have, tucked away in a drawer for years, not because of the songs inside, but because it held something she had left behind, a trace of her. James admits in the letter that he never told her any of this. The right moment never came, he writes, and then life just moved on. The words are underlined, not in anger, but in surrender, as if he had long ago accepted that life doesn't wait for the hesitant. He tells her how he watched her from a distance, how he noticed when she stopped wearing the blue ribbon in her hair, how he saw the day she walked into church with a ring on her finger. That was the day, he says, when he realized his silence had made the decision for him. The pages deepen in tone as his words spill out faster, almost as though he fears the ink will run dry before he can say all that he's kept in. He writes about moments no one else could have noticed, how she laughed when the pastor's dog wandered in during a service, how her hands shook when she lit a candle during Christmas Eve Mass, how she lingered at the back steps after choir practice, as though she too were waiting for someone who never came. Every sentence drips with aching regret and undying affection. He doesn't shy away from admitting how much it hurt to see her happy with another man, but he also doesn't blame her for it. Instead, he blames himself, his fear, his hesitation, his unwillingness to risk the quiet safety of longing, for the unpredictable danger of speaking the truth. You were never mine, he writes, but you were always in my heart. It is in this part of the letter that James becomes most vulnerable. He confesses that even years later, he would pass the old church and slow his truck just to glance at the windows and wonder if she might be inside. He describes finding her name in the local paper once, attached to a charity event, and clipping the article without knowing why. He says he kept it folded inside the same drawer as the hymn book, as if the two belonged together. The rawness of his confession is almost unbearable to read. You can feel the years in it, the way time didn't dull his feelings, only made them quieter, deeper, more ingrained. It's the kind of love that never gets to bloom in daylight, but refuses to die in the dark. And as you read his words, you begin to understand the strange beauty and cruelty of it. He loved her in silence, and in doing so, he kept her untouched by disappointment, but also by the truth. If you've ever left words unsaid, words that still press against your chest even now, I want you to share just one word in the comments below. Not a whole story, not an explanation, just one word that still weighs on you. Someone out there will read it, and they'll know exactly what you mean. They'll feel less alone, and maybe, just maybe, they'll find the courage to speak before it's too late. Because in this letter, James is doing what he could never do while she was within reach. He's speaking, even if she'll never hear. And the deeper we go into his words, the clearer it becomes that some truths are too big to stay buried forever. Halfway through the letter, the ink seems to grow heavier, the pen's strokes more deliberate, as if James is bracing himself for what he's about to put into words. The air in that little farmhouse must have felt thick that night, the kind of stillness that settles before a storm. He writes that the day he sealed this letter, he had already made a decision that would change the rest of his life. He was leaving town, Not for a week, not for a season, but forever. But he knew with absolute certainty that when he stepped into that truck and drove down the dirt road away from Lexington, Kentucky, he would never again see the white steeple of the church where he'd watched her sing. He would never again catch her reflection in the stained glass windows or feel that unspoken connection that had both haunted and sustained him for years. His words carry a strange mixture of resignation and desperation. He admits that he had rehearsed 1,000 ways to tell her in person, 1,000 ways to say goodbye, to confess it all in the hope that she might hear him and understand. But life, he says, is not generous with perfect moments. He never found one that felt right. So instead, he wrote it all down, every feeling, every truth, every piece of his heart, folded it into paper, and sealed it inside that envelope with the intention of sending it before he left. And then, the tone shifts again. A sudden change, sharp and jarring, like a cold wind through an open door. He writes, "You might wonder why this letter never reached you, why these words meant only for your eyes, sat silent for so long. The truth is, I didn't keep it from you. Someone else did." In that moment, the reader feels the first sting of betrayal. James goes on to explain that he had left the letter on the kitchen table, ready to post the next morning. But when he went to retrieve it, it was gone. At first, he thought perhaps he'd misplaced it, that his own nervousness had made him careless. But days later, he overheard a conversation in the hallway of the house. It was his cousin, living with him at the time, speaking in a low voice to another relative. He heard his own name, he heard hers, and then he heard the truth. His cousin had taken the letter, read it, and decided that Elizabeth should never see it. James doesn't write these words with anger, at least not the kind that shouts. Instead, there's a quiet devastation in his tone, as though the fight had already gone out of him before he even had the chance to begin. His cousin claimed it was for his own good, claimed it was to protect him from humiliation, to protect her from scandal. Maybe it was jealousy, maybe it was control, maybe it was some twisted form of love disguised as interference. James never knew for sure. All he knew was that with that single act, a decision was made for both of them, a decision that neither of them had the chance to choose. He writes about the day he left town, the letter already lost, the words already silenced. He drove away with a hollow feeling, a gnawing emptiness that no distance could fill. He tried to imagine her reaction if she had read it, tried to picture her face, her eyes scanning the lines he'd poured himself into. Would she have smiled through tears? Would she have been angry? Would she have run to stop him? These are questions he admits he asked himself 1,000 times in the years that followed, questions that turned into a quiet ache that never faded. The weight of it presses down on the page. This wasn't just a missed chance, it was a stolen one. A hidden letter, locked away in an attic for decades, altered the course of 2 entire lives. What could have been a confession that brought closure, or perhaps even a beginning, became instead a silent chapter neither of them knew existed. And in that silence, both of them grew older, carrying pieces of a story they didn't even know they shared. You can feel the heartbreak here, not just for what was lost, but for the fact that they never even knew it was lost. There's a particular cruelty in that, when the thing you needed most existed all along, but was hidden from you by someone else's choice. It's the kind of pain that mixes grief with helplessness, the kind of truth that makes you want to claw back through time and force it into the light. And as you read James's words, you can almost see that attic. You can imagine the letter sitting there, tucked away in a dusty box between stacks of old newspapers and forgotten family relics, while the 2 people it was meant to bind drifted further apart with every passing year. If you've ever had something kept from you, something that could have changed your life, share just one word in the comments that describes how that felt. That one word might be the exact thing someone else here needs to read to know they're not alone. Because here, in these pages, the truth is finally breaking free, and what comes next will not leave you untouched. This letter sat in the dark for almost half a century, until now. For 48 years, these words lay in silence, their meaning locked away from the one heart they were meant to reach. I can still picture it, the moment I opened that attic box, the dust blooming into the air, the faint scent of cedar and old rain-soaked wood clinging to the paper. My hands shook, not because of its age, but because I could feel the weight of decades pressing against it, as though the letter itself had been holding its breath all this time, waiting for someone, anyone, to set it free. There's a strange heaviness in knowing you are the first to truly hear someone's final truth. Every sentence James wrote was a piece of himself that Elizabeth never saw, a truth that never got the chance to change the course of their lives. Some of life's most powerful words are the ones never heard, the ones trapped in the gap between the courage to speak and the moment to listen. And I can't stop thinking about that gap, about how many lives it has quietly reshaped. How many people have walked through their days unaware that somewhere, tucked away in a drawer, a box, an attic, is a letter with their name on it, one that could have mended what was broken, ignited what was fading, or finally answered the questions that kept them awake at night. How many of us are living in the aftermath of a truth we were never given the chance to know? James's words make me think about how fragile timing really is. One wrong pause, one hesitation, and the moment you thought would come someday is gone forever. He believed he had missed his chance. He believed the letter was lost forever. And yet here I was, holding it, reading it, breathing life back into a story that had been silent for decades. The thought that haunts me most is this: what would Elizabeth have done if she had held this letter in her hands all those years ago? Would she have left everything behind to follow him? Would she have written back, even if it was too late? Or would the truth have only deepened the ache of what could never be? We'll never know, and that is its own kind of heartbreak. The silence after reading the last line was almost unbearable. I remember setting the letter down and just staring. The attic felt different, quieter, heavier, like the air itself was trying to process what had just been uncovered. I thought about the years that had passed while this envelope sat in the dark, each year pulling James and Elizabeth further apart, each one cementing the reality that their paths would never cross again. And yet, even with all that loss, there was something profoundly human in those pages, a reminder that love, once it takes root, doesn't really die. It might be buried. It might be hidden. It might be locked away in an attic box for half a century, but it's still there, waiting for the moment it's allowed to speak. I wish I could tell you that was the only thing I found that day, that after uncovering James's truth, I closed the box, climbed down from the attic, and let the past rest where it belonged. But that wouldn't be the truth. Because buried under that first layer of letters and photographs, beneath the folded linen and the brittle newspaper clippings, there was something else. Another envelope. Not as old, but still worn with time. Its seal was intact. The paper yellowed just enough to tell me it had been waiting a long time, 15 years to be exact. And when I turned it over and saw the name written across the front, my heart stopped. It was a name I never expected to see. A name that in its own way carries just as much weight as Elizabeth's. That's the story I'll tell you next time. Before we close this chapter, I want to ask you something, and I want you to answer it honestly in the comments. What would you do if you found a letter like this? Would you read it? Would you deliver it to the person it was meant for, even after all these years? Or would you leave it in the dark, afraid of what the truth might change? Your answer matters, because you never know when someone else here might be wrestling with the same choice. And if you felt something while listening to James's story, if even one line stayed with you, don't leave without being part of this journey. Hit that subscribe button right now so you don't miss what comes next, because the next letter might just shake you even more than this one did. If you've made it this far, I want you to leave a comment that simply says, "I would open it." Let those words be a sign that you're willing to face the truth, no matter how long it's been hidden. While you're here, tap the like button so this story can reach someone who needs it today. And when this video ends, click on the next one appearing on your screen. It's where we'll open that second envelope and step into another story that's been waiting quietly for 15 years to be told.